So we've been having lots of nice time and space in the first month of our winter retreat to lots of nice time and space for practicing together, practicing in solitude in the afternoons and evenings. And the weather has been encouraging us to move inwards. Cold, dark, rainy, just what California appreciates at this time of year. And it's really, I find it very settling and soothing and calming also. Just often spending time in my kuti, listening to the rain pattering on the roof outside, and just having that extra time and space and encouragement to be quiet and contemplate Dhamma themes, do some reading. Very nourishing. I think, sometime in the past week, I can't remember whether it was a reading or a Dhamma reflection in the evening, that Ajahn just briefly passed on a thought of a theme that he appreciates contemplating a fair amount. It was just a passing comment in context of something else, but that he enjoys contemplating the 5 Indriyas, the spiritual faculties. So finds that a useful framework for contemplating Dhamma. And it reminded me of I feel the same. It's a very useful set of teachings to reflect on and to develop in our experience. And so I started to ponder it a bit in my quiet moments, and just had a few additional thoughts to share maybe about them tonight. Indriyas, the word Indriya coming from, I think it's based on the word Indra, the god in the Hindu pantheon, and generally meaning something like leader. So the Indriyas are leaders in their way. There's a whole different sets of Indriyas in the canon. The sense faculty, Indriya often translated as faculties, so like abilities or potentials, frameworks that we have, and one of them is the sense faculties, the 6 sense faculties that are referred to as Indriyas, and then also more along the lines of what he was referring to in his talk, the 5 spiritual faculties. So these are guides and leaders for us. The 6 sense faculties sometimes guiding us and leading us into areas where we really shouldn't go. But if we use the spiritual faculties, the spiritual Indriyas, as our primary leader, then they can help guide the sense faculties into skillful places too. As I was kind of going through them and thinking about them, and particularly I'm trying a whole lot more these days to just really tune into the experience level of practice. So reflecting on these themes, but also, well, what does this actually mean in terms of meditative experience, or just trying to live a skillful life based on Dhamma, bringing it to the level of actualization, not just theory. And what does it mean to experience the 5 faculties, or to train ourselves with the 5 faculties? What does it feel like inside, really moving to that level of feeling tone, feeling quality? And that I think it was an earlier reflection, last reflection I gave, was kind of moving in those lines in terms of exploring my experience in meditation and just in general around the qualities of lightness and heaviness, and what are the things that I'm bringing into my awareness and experience that just result in the tendency to get enmeshed in heavy mind states or negative mind states or distracted mind states, versus ones that lead to lightness and ease, well-being, and really using those tones as benchmarks to see if I'm applying my attention in my practice in the right way. Is my life getting heavier or is my life getting lighter? And really steering it in the light direction, because it's so much easier. And in retrospect, as I was kind of thinking through these 5 spiritual faculties, I realized in retrospect, and it wasn't anything I was particularly aware of when I was reflecting on those topics in the last talk I gave, but realizing that some of the qualities that I brought up in terms of looking at experience in terms of lightness and heaviness actually ended up being reflections around the first 3 of those spiritual faculties, looking at faith or saddha versus that's the light version versus the heavy version of belief, opinions, views, but belief in general, and the difference between the two and the quality of lightness that comes with a true faith based in confidence in the teaching and in the practice, and the uplift that brings, the lightness that brings, versus holding on to fixed views, belief. So that was, in a sense, a contemplation of or exploration of the first Indriya. And then the second one, energy, and looking at how we can apply our minds in ways through appropriate attention or inappropriate attention that either result in an increase in energy, increase in virya, or a stagnation or a diminution of energy, a spending of energy through unwise attention. And then the quality of sati, mindfulness, as a way of holding things lightly versus clinging, grasping as a way of holding things heavily. So those were themes that were kind of running around in my mind at the time, and little did I know that they were really those first 3 spiritual faculties. So as I was bringing this up over the past couple of weeks in terms of consideration, looking into my own experience a bit, I kind of wondered, well, can the same framework be used in looking at the experience of the other 2 faculties, samadhi and panya, the 4th and 5th of the 5 indriyas. So I just came up with a few explorations around that over the past couple of weeks. Kind of thinking about panya, wisdom, or discernment. The 5th one, it's got so many different levels, so many different layers, and different ways that we can hold them, that if maybe viewed incorrectly or picked up incorrectly, can result in some more entanglement and heaviness in our lives versus a lightening of our load if we view discernment in more skillful dharmic ways. Lots of layers as I was contemplating these. One of the layers being just some of the classic teachings in the suttas about grasping of wrong views that through unwise attention and speculation. Sometimes we think of, or some people maybe sometimes think of the development of wisdom as trying to understand in the nature of self or the nature of the universe, the nature of the cosmos, kind of metaphysical or philosophical ideas, and that if we can just get those straight, then that's developing wisdom. And that certainly was the case at the time of the Buddha. Many different religious sects, different practitioners, picking up these different kinds of speculative views and expounding on them and developing their practice around them. Views like around self and what was I in the past? How was I in the past? What will I be in the future? How will I be in the future? Am I now? What am I now? How am I now? Those kinds of questions about selfhood, and more along the lines also of the nature of the cosmos, the existence of the world around us and certain laws and speculative views. What the Buddha ended up suggesting wasn't such a skillful way to try and frame spiritual practice, or trying to frame those questions, because it ends up just getting gnarled up in what he called very graphically the wilderness of views, or the thicket of views, the entanglement that we can get into conceptually, intellectually, trying to figure these things out. And that's not really a development of wisdom. That's not the development of panya in the way that the Buddha talks about, but more, as he says, I teach only two things: suffering and the end of suffering. So the framework of the Four Noble Truths as being the complete development of wisdom, and that just looking at the qualities when one gets entangled in these other kinds of speculations, and the heaviness that comes from that, because there's really no answer, and the simplicity and lightness of basically addressing the fundamental human issue of dukkha and our wish to be free from that, kind of telescoping our reflective capacities to concentrate on that particular issue, dukkha, the ending of dukkha. And when we do that, the simplicity and lightness, actually, even though it's kind of sounds like it might be contemplating a heavy issue, it kind of brings it all into perspective in a way that, when properly done, lightens the heart. Another kind of reflection that has been coming up a little bit in that area, reflections on the law of karma, which is one of the teachings in Right View. In a discussion the other day, a sutta that I really appreciate came to my mind. It was one that was brought to my attention many years ago. It was my first time away from the monastery, when I went to stay at Chithurst Monastery, my third vasa, and I was experiencing at that time just some really deep dukkha of past memories coming up from my lay life of unskillful actions, body, speech, mind, that were weighing heavily on my mind, regrets, and just wondering, oh gosh, the karmic consequences of these things. Will I be free from them? Knowing fully that the experience of just having to remember them was, a majority of that karmic consequence, but also thinking, gosh, this doesn't bode well for my for my future. Thinking about these things. So I was talking with another monk about it, because for some reason they were just flooding me during those first few months there. And he brought to my attention a sutta called the Conch Trumpet Blower, which is in the Samyutta Nikaya. And it's a sutta where there's a wanderer from another sect, I believe it was the Jains, and he was talking with the Buddha, and they were talking about the teachings of his teacher in the Jain sect. If my memory serves me right, it was the Jain sect, so the leader would have been the Niganta Nataputta. And they were talking about various aspects of his teachings, but one of them, the one that caught my attention mostly, and and that I was referred to, was some teachings on karma, where the Buddha was quizzing this follower and asking him the views on karma, and basically the teaching from his teacher was that a very deterministic view of karma, that if it was within the context of the precepts, so that the follower was saying that, for instance, with the taking the life of living beings, he was reflecting, yes, I have taken the life of living beings. And the teaching is that surely the inevitable consequence of that is that I will suffer in the lower realms in my next rebirth. I will go to hell realms. That's the teaching. People who take life get reborn in the hell realms. And then people who steal, similarly kind of a thing. Surely the karmic consequence of that is very deterministic. Rebirth in lower realms. People who engage in sexual misconduct, people who tell lies. These all have strong karmic consequences leading to rebirth in the lower realms. Surely I've done all of these things, and my fate is sealed, and this is what I can expect. So that was the teaching that this follower told the Buddha. And the Buddha said, well, surely if you have committed these things, if you have that thought, I've committed the act of killing living beings, etc., and I lament and beat my breast and say, I surely will be driven to the hell realms because of this, then sure as shooting, that's going to happen. If you did violate those precepts and you hold the conviction, the belief that unalterably that's going to be the consequence, then you've set the stage for yourself to realize that reality. And basically, then the Buddha goes on to say, but that's not what I teach. What I teach is that the appropriate response would be to reflect and say, I have taken life. I have stolen things. I have committed sexual misconduct. I have told lies. And I can't undo those acts. I did do them. And I regret them. And what I will do from now on is I will make a resolution, make a resolve not to do those anymore. I won't steal. I won't take life. I won't engage in sexual misconduct. I won't tell lies. And then you make that resolution. One makes that resolution. And that in itself is purifying one's heart, purifying one's conduct, purifying one's sila, by making that determination, by recognizing and admitting it, owning up to it, and then resolving to not do it anymore. And that in itself is a purification of the heart, a purification of the mind, and leads to, a much easier experience in life, whatever comes one's way. And, one can look at this in not only the cosmological sense of rebirth in lower realms, but the rebirth that we put ourselves through in terms of psychological rebirth. If we constantly rehash our past actions, and not only our own past actions, but the actions of others and how they affect us, things that other people do that are harmful to us, and how we hold on to those and rehash and grasp onto those memories and these perceptions of past wrongs, whether they're our own or whether they're someone else's. then how that drives us into a literal psychological hell realm right here and now. We don't have to wait for a future life. But that kind of acknowledgement and essentially the gradual recognition that holding on and grasping on is what drives us into a heavy state of mind. Again, it's that heaviness of how we hold these things and how they result in our experience. And that through that resolution to let go of those past memories, and if it's our own conduct, the encouragement to resolve to abstain from that. And if it's others' conduct, to recognize the pain and the difficulty that they are engaged in, or that they were engaged in, and how just like me, they caused harm as well, and how the only answer is to really recognize and let go, and resolve not to repeat. In that way, we can purify our hearts, purify our minds, and not dwell in heaviness. And then he goes further in the sutta to say, that the full development of that more open, spacious mind and escape, in a sense, from the full effects, the full karmic effects of these previous actions, is by developing the four divine abidings, the Brahma-viharas, the loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity. And that by developing these expansive, all-encompassing spheres of consciousness, states of mind, then any action that does come to fruition is experienced as just a mere trifling of what it would be if our minds are constricted and enmeshed with concerns around these past actions. It's like the simile that he offers also of putting a teaspoon of salt in a glass of water, and one can taste that very salty taste quite strongly, versus a teaspoon of salt in the river Ganges and tasting the water and not being able to essentially taste the salt at all. So that our expansive mind states that are all-encompassing, filled with these very uplifting qualities, is the environment that we hold the results of past karma in. And so that in a sense, we may still experience results of past karma, but it's a completely different way of experiencing them. So this is very different from the very deterministic view of karma. How if one picks it up in that way, that it's a very heavy experience, and if one picks it up in the way that the Buddha taught, it's a very light, uplifting, positive, encouraging kind of way of holding that teaching. So, needless to say, I found that incredibly useful at that time, and still find a very useful reflection. A lot of gratitude for the monk who brought that to my attention. So there's a couple of thoughts on how we can hold the contemplation of the spiritual faculty of wisdom in different ways and receive different results. Going backwards a little bit to samadhi, the fourth spiritual faculty, and how it can be held in a way that produces a fair amount of tightness or produces a fair amount of ease too. I find it useful to think about it in those ways. That, I think a common way sometimes we get entangled with the whole development of samadhi can produce a sense of tightness. I've, heard many times monks say, "Oh, well, I just have real hard time," or not just monks, everybody, many people, developing samadhi. It's not something I'm very adept at. I'm not very good at it. I'll concentrate on other areas of my practice. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes they're referring to the teachings that many of us have received of developing concentration as one translation of samadhi in a very methodical way with a fixated attention on a particular small anatomical point in the body that's very exclusive and that often ends up being devoid of sampajanya, of clear awareness, but that an alternative way of considering it, and even using the word jhanas more in a different way, that encourages a much more open, broad experience of composure of mind, samadhi, that is inclusive and not limited in scope. And as the Thai Kruba Ajahns often talk about, an all-around awareness, and not a limited, intensely focused, exclusive kind of awareness. And that, at least in my experience, and I think in the experience of some others that I've talked to anyway, that intensive focus of awareness without any kind of all-around awareness can be very, tight and constricting and heavy, kind of, and trying to almost, trying to get it, trying to get something through that kind of focused attention without any sampajanya, without any clear awareness in a broader sense, and that it can be very peaceful, it can be very blissful, but it ends up being a fairly disembodied kind of experience. And if you read the translations that we often chant we do chant them, but the translations of the descriptions of the jhanas, they're all very much bodily oriented. The different descriptions of, the bathman's soap and the lotuses in the water, the currents of water running through the body, and essentially, and the white sheath over the body. All of these are very bodily oriented descriptions of the different levels of jhana. And even in the third jhana, the description, accompanied by mindfulness and clear comprehension is described as an aspect of third jhana even. So, taking that into account and loosening up a bit maybe our what we expect in terms of samadhi and what its true development results in the ease and the well-being and the lightness, rather than a heavy, super focused intensity that we sometimes get the idea that that's what it is. I'm trying to remember a description or a quote from Ajahn Jeff that kind of points to this, something along the lines of over time in his experience, he's kind of found that people who are adept at a very intense, establishing a very intense, focused point of concentration that's devoid of clear awareness, mindfulness and clear awareness. There are people who are adept at doing that. In his experience, they are also psychologically adept at denial and disassociation. So to be careful with how we interpret our practices, how we interpret the teachings around these development of samadhi. For me, I really appreciate that encouragement to go broad and light and open, and it doesn't mean scattered. and all over the place without any focus. It just points to a broader, more comprehensive, all-around awareness that also has the qualities of firm establishment. So that instead of like one-pointed concentration, maybe the descriptors of unwavering composure have a much lighter feel, but one that is very clear and grounded. And it brings to mind, just sort of that image of having say, the object of meditation. For instance, as an example that we use, many of us use, is the breathing, the in and out breathing, as our baseline level, and that the different defilements, kilesa, will arise and pass away, but the sampajanya basically just knows the arising, the persistence, and the passing of these thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and that's consistent throughout many different levels of samadhi, that sampajanya. So that even though one has the firm baseline of say, the in and out breathing, the rhythmic quality, to bring us this sense of unwavering composure, then when kilesa do arise, there is the knowing of them and the knowing of their passing. So there's these two levels operating at the same time, and kind of the image to me comes of a musical composition where you have a really strong bass line, that's repetitive and rhythmic and very grounding, with a melody that's sometimes playing around in different ways, in different directions and coming back and forth, but that there's always the solidity of that line, that underneath current in the musical composition. So the breathing, the rhythm, is consistent. It's there. It's unwavering. Our attention is with it, as well as allowing the other things as they manifest to arise and pass away on their own. Kind of how Ajahn Chah describes the still flowing water, and that way of holding it in my mind and experiencing it and practicing with it produces a sense of ease and well-being and lightness, rather than a kind of a heavy, got to get me some concentration, bearing down quality. And then kind of back a moment, just kind of swooping back to the reflection on panya, discernment. Just, another way that sometimes we think of, in terms of analysis, say, or of conjecture about the three characteristics, anicca, dukkha, and anatta, and how it can be held, the contemplations around those can be held as kind of a doctrinal contemplation. Again, a description of experience, a description of reality, as opposed to a contemplative strategy, which I've always appreciated the encouragement to use those contemplations as a contemplative strategy, rather than as holding to a particular doctrine of, like, everything is unsatisfactory, everything is changing, everything is not self. It's sort of like, well, let's bring that to the experience right here and now, and rather than just forming opinions about it, or intellectual concepts, and leaving it at that, we bring it to the present moment experience of watching the arising and passing, the lightness of this very moment of when we've settled, when the mind has settled and is quite steady, to turn to that lens of Dhamma and seeing just right here in the moment the arising and passing of sight, sounds, tastes, all the sense experience that we have, the thoughts. And seeing the insubstantiality of them, separating the knowing quality from the object as a way of lightening our experience. We become disentangled and unmeshed from the phenomena that arise in our awareness. So in some ways, I think that's leading to the ultimate development of that spiritual faculty of panya, resulting in a very buoyant state of mind, one that's ripe for release. That's when the Buddha describes the spiritual faculty of samadhi, he uses that word. He says, one develops the faculty of composure, the faculty of samadhi, with release as its object, not with fixation, not with grabbing, holding, but with release as its object. So that the release that comes from deep understanding through panya also is the purpose of the samadhi. So when I find myself sitting down, practicing periods of meditation, reflecting on these kinds of things like the five spiritual faculties, I'm finding it just so much more useful to keep redirecting myself to, okay, what's the internal experience like? Is it resulting in heaviness, constriction? Is it resulting in lightness, ease of mind, release? So the lightness of true faith versus the heaviness of belief, dogma, the lightness of good energy, energy directed in a positive, easeful way rather than putting our minds on things that drag our energy down, holding with mindfulness rather than holding with clinging or grasping, the lightness of a composed mind, an unwavering composure, the lightness of an unwavering composure versus the heaviness of a one-pointed concentration, and the lightness of true understanding, in the moment awareness of arising and passing, and then sometimes just allowing oneself to dwell with the non-arising, and not imputing a sense of ownership, grasping around a sense of self, anatta, non-abiding. So non-arising and non-abiding as ways of thinking of the spiritual faculty of panya. So these are just some of the things that have been rolling around in my practice in the past number of weeks, and I'll just offer it for people to reflect on. I'll leave it there for this evening.